boys and girls. Welcome to Everyday Math Lesson 7.6, Day to Day, Standing Jumps and Arm Spans. The materials that you'll need today, notebook paper, pencil, math journal, your template, and then if you have home link 7.6. If you don't have that home link today, you can still follow along with the lesson, but then just write your answers on either your whiteboard or notebook. Let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is go over our math boxes from the previous lesson. So if you can open up your math journal to page 172. If you're noticing that you have any mistakes, please fix those with your pencil and eraser. So for our first question, number 1, draw hands to show 7:15. You can see how my shorter hand, my hour hand, is just a little bit past the 7, and then my minute hand, the longer hand, is pointing to the 3 to show 15 minutes. For question number 2, which day had the longest recess? Circle the best answer. I can see that Friday had the tallest bar, showing that it had 30 minutes of recess. So my choice is B, Friday. For question 3, use counters to make a 5 by 3 array. You can draw the array and then how many counters in all, and there should be 15. For question 4, fill in the missing numbers. So I started at 614 and I went down 10 to have 604, and then I went up 10 to have 624. Then my checkpoint, they gave us 625, and I know one more than that is 626. For question number 5, draw or write the names of 2 things in the classroom that are the shape of a rectangular prism. So there's lots of different answers that you could have had, but I thought about a tissue box, and I also thought about a whiteboard eraser. But again, there's lots of different things that would be in the shape of rectangular prisms. For question number 6, write the fraction. The part shaded, you should have had 1/4 or 1/4. And if your middle line is a diagonal, that's fine too. So double check to make sure that your page is correct before moving on to the next part of the lesson. For the next part of the lesson, if you could either use notebook paper or whiteboard and marker to write down your answers. If the speed is too fast, pause as often as needed. For these first 3 questions, we are adding, or in a way kind of subtracting, but we're thinking, so if we start at 48, how much more to get to 90? So can you pause the video and then press play when you're ready to check? All right, second graders, so if I know if I added 2 more, I'd be at 50, and then to go from 50 to 90, it would be 40. So 40 plus 2 would be 42. So you can either think in your head to solve them, or you can write out the problems. But could you now solve 60 equals how much plus 34, and how much plus 23 to get to 70? Press pause and play when you're ready to check. All right, second graders, so I know if I added 6 more, I would be up to 40, and then I would need to add 20 to get from 40 to 60. So 20 plus 6 equals 26. For this next one, I know if I added 7 more to 23, I'd be at 30, and then if I added 30 plus 40, I would be at 70. So I should have 40 plus 7, which equals 47. We're going to use the same way of thinking, but now our problems are going to look a little bit different. So this time I'm thinking 80 minus 31. I'm thinking 50 minus 15 and 60 minus 17. Can you use your subtraction strategies to solve these 3 problems? Press pause and then play when you're ready to check these 3. All right, second graders. So I could think, well, 80 minus 30 would get me to 50. And then if I subtract 1 more, 50 minus 1, I would have 49. For 50 minus 15, I can think, well, 50 minus 10 is 40. And then 40 minus 5 more would get me to 35. And for my last one, I can think, well, 60 minus 10 would be 50. And then 50 minus 7 would bring me to 43. All right, we'll practice more with problems like this in future lessons. But the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is to put your notebook or your whiteboard to the side, and we're going to talk about our home link 7.6. We'll also be looking in our math journal too. So the first thing, I want you to either look back on page 174 in your math journal if you already wrote down your arm span. if you didn't yet, if you could use a tape measure and ask a person at home or a person sitting next to you to measure your arm span. And notice how your arm spans are going to be from the tip of your one hand to the tip of your other hand. So the distance between your arms there. So why don't you press pause, figure out your arm span, and then press play when you're ready to move on. All right, second graders. So we should already have our arm span, and so we're going to use that HomeLink 7.6. So could you write down your arm span is how many inches long? And then you could think about that or tell someone at school how long your arm span is. But then we're going to do a little bit of comparing. So you're going to compare your arm span to either someone at home or someone at school. So can you find someone who has a longer arm span than you? And then write down the name of that person that has a longer arm span than you. And then can you also do that with someone that has a shorter arm span than you? So why don't you press pause and make sure you have questions, your first one and question number 2 filled out, and then press play when you're ready to check. All right, second graders. So I said that my arm span was about 50 inches long, and I'm thinking about a kid for that one. I didn't actually measure my adult arm span, but I used the measurements from a second grader. And so then if I'm thinking like a second grader, I could think, well, my mom has a longer arm span than me. Or maybe you had a friend's name, or maybe your teacher has a longer arm span than you. And then when I'm thinking of someone that had a shorter arm span than me, and again, I'm thinking like a second grader, and I have a younger brother. So my younger brother has a shorter arm span than me. I could also think about someone in the classroom that maybe had a shorter arm span than me. So if you can double check to make sure you have your answers filled out. For question number 3, it says list some objects below that are about the same length as your arm span. And then for question 4, you're going to explain how did you know that those objects were about the same length as your arm span. So could you press pause, solve problems 3 and 4, and then press play when you're ready to check. All right, second graders. So hopefully you found lots of different things, but here are a few things that I found that were about the size of my arm span. So I found a table or a desk that was about the same length of my arm span. I found a TV that was about the same. I found a tall stool, and so the height of that tall stool was about the same as my arm span. And then also at home, I found my fireplace was about the same as my arm span. And then when I figured that out, so I was able to use my arm span to measure the objects. And so that's how I did that for number 4. You maybe have a similar answer, or maybe your answer is a little different, and that's okay too. Second graders, for the last part of the lesson, I'm just going to click over to this part. If you could answer, so we have 2 addition problems, 23 plus 19 and 45 plus 58, and then we have 2 subtraction problems, 64 minus 39 and 86 minus 57. Could you press pause, solve problems 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then press play when you're ready to check. All right, second graders, and if I'm ever going too fast, please pause as often as needed. But I'm going to take a look at question number 5 first. So I'm adding 23 plus 19. Well, I know that 9 plus 3 equals 12. So notice how I carried my 1, and then I put my 2 below. And then 2 plus 1 plus 1 is 4, giving me my answer of 42. And if you have any wrong, please fix your mistakes with your pencil and eraser. For question number 6, I'm going to start with 5 plus 8, which I know is 13, so I carried my 1 up top and I put my 3 below. And then 5 plus 4 plus 1, well, I know 4 plus 1 is 5, and 5 plus 5 is 10. So my answer is 103, 103. Now I'm going to switch my thinking over to subtraction. So I have 64 minus 39. Now notice how if I have 4 and I'm taking away 9, I have more on the floor, so I need to go next door. I'm going to change my 6 to a 5. My 4 now becomes a 14. Well, I know 14 minus 9 equals 5, and then 5 minus 3 equals 2, giving me my answer of 25. And for my last problem, I have 86 minus 57. So I have more on the floor again, so I needed to go next door. I changed my 8 to a 7. My 6 becomes a 16. I know 16 minus 7 is 9, and then I know that 7 minus 5 is 2, giving me my answer of 29. So double check to make sure you have your home link correct before moving on to math boxes. Our math box page today is 175. I'll quickly talk about the directions, then I'll ask that you complete the page on your own. When you're all done, take a picture and add that picture to Seesaw for your classroom teacher. We will go over this page in our next video. So for question number 1, I changed the directions a little bit, and I'm going to ask that you show 3 possible ways to make 40 cents. For question number 2, if I have 2 bunches of bananas and each bunch has 5 bananas, how many bananas in all? If you can complete the diagram and fill out your answer. For question 3, what is the temperature? Fill in the correct answer. For question 4, which number is the most popular or the mode? So looking at these numbers, which one happens the most times? For question 5, first make a ballpark estimate and then subtract to find the actual answer. And then for question 6, you need to decide either less than, greater than, or equal to which of these 2 fractions has more. All right, I'll see you next time.